course, week 6 means that you only have one more week after this, and then it's going to be test time. So hopefully you've been playing some catch up, watching some classes, and getting yourself ready. I haven't seen any questions really from people, so I guess you're catching on to what you should be. But anyway, from there we'll go ahead and drive right into this. Tonight we're going to talk about operating procedures. And let's see. I'm trying to figure out why I can't go forward here. There's why. There we go. Nope. Okay, if you stop and think about when you're having a conversation with your radio, stop and think about how you're having a conversation when you're on the telephone. What do you normally do? Well, you say hello, you have a greeting. And then you find out, hey, Bruce, is that you? Or Sharon, is that you? Yeah. So you find out who's participating. You exchange information, and you have to take turns because you can't all talk off for one another. Salutations. And then finally, you end the conversation. And essentially, that's the same way it works in the radio world. And we'll be going into that right now. Keep a QSO, and you'll be finding out more about the Q codes as you go along. We don't use 10 codes. That is a big no-no in the ham world. But actually, by FCC, we are forbidden to use any type of coded information back and forth. It has to be clear language. The only thing differing from that is the Q codes, which are pretty much an international code. So when you have, say, the word QSO, that stands for having a conversation with somebody. If you're at your QTH, it means you're at your home. So you'll find out more as you go along. But in the typical QSO, you have the greeting. You identify who's participating by the use of the call signs. W5HLG, N5HZR is Mark. You exchange information, taking turns back and forth. How you doing? Tell me about your rig. Tell me about your antenna. What's been going on over at your house? And you have a good day. We'll talk to you later. And you end the conversation with your call sign again. Now, besides that, if you have a lengthy conversation, one of the things that you're going to have to do is make sure that every 10 minutes you stick in your call sign, because that is required by the Federal Communications Commission. Now, we have a great way of doing that here in the club, in that every 10 minutes, our repeater does an identifier, W5NOR repeater. And so it's either going to be in Morse code or clear speech. So that's going to be an easy reminder for you that, oh, it's time for me to give my call sign. And you just identify. You don't have to say, for ID or anything else, because we all know already it's for ID. You just say your call sign and get it over with. Remember, in radio manners, you always try to speak clearly and distinctly. Remember, you can't see the other person talking. And if they mumble, it's what it comes across. They're mumbling. Use phonetics. And that's one of the things that you're also going to get used to after a while is the phonetic alphabet. Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, on down the line. Makes it easy to understand in passing information back and forth. If you have to spell out something, you can use the phonetic alphabet. And I don't care what country they're in, they're going to understand what you're spelling out. And assume all communications are public because, gee, they are. So choose your topics accordingly. Don't talk about the Swingers Club or anything else. Before transmitting, be sure the frequency is clear and that you're authorized to use it. Now, that comes into play Remember, you're getting your technician's license, and that's going to allow you to use some of the HF frequencies as well. But if all of a sudden you're listening one day and you happen to drift over on 40 meters and listening and think, gee, that guy's really clear, I'd like to talk to him. Just remember that you're not authorized to use that frequency, under your license. So that could cause you a problem. Again, the station ID rule, 10 minutes. And frequencies are shared. The repeater here in Norman has a couple of hundred people that share it on a regular basis. So believe me, you're not going to hear traffic on it all the time. But different nights of the week during nets and things like that, you will hear traffic. One of the biggest things in the world, no one has a claim to a frequency. Don't let anybody ever tell you, oh, this is my frequency. You're going to have to go find another one. Nobody, no club, no nothing owns a frequency. Every one of us are free to use them. Schedules, nets, and pre-planned events. Just like we pre-planned this class, we have other pre-planned events, such as on Tuesday nights, we have what's called an ARRL net. And it's emergency services check-in net. And it's a controlled net. In other words, one person, has a control of the net, and he contacts each individual as the net goes on to see if they want to check in and if they have any traffic. Always, be flexible and have a plan B. If you can't get through to somebody, then try another frequency that may be clearer. There's always ways to take care of not having good communications. Radio matters. What do we do? Well, we give different things. We give signal reports. How well are you hearing me? Well, you're a 5.9. That a 5.9 would indicate, like you heard Bill last week, that your audio is good and so is your signal strength. Power level. Sometimes when I'm on HF and talking to a station, in another country or even in this country, they'll ask, they'll tell me that they're running, such and such a radio, and they're operating at, a kilowatt or 1,500 watts or whatever. And I'll tell them my radio, and I'll tell them I'm operating like at 600 watts. So you're exchanging that information back and forth because it lets you and them know how well that you're coming through and exchanging that information with that locale, with that power level. Avoid excessive power. One of the things that the FCC tells us is try to make communications using the lowest power that you can to have a clear conversation. If I'm talking to a guy that's on the other side of Norman, I don't need to use 1.5 kilowatts. I could probably get by with 5 watts, probably get by with actually 0.5 watt. So, that's the thing, is you'll learn over time that you don't have to use, just because you have the power, you don't have to use the power. Again, the Q code for location, QTH. That's where you're going to be at. Now, grid locators, once you start getting your license or testing, we'll be giving you some information that has all the different communications grids that are laid out for the country. And you'll see exactly where we are, which is like grid 15, and every place else in the country. So if somebody tells you they're in grid 7 or grid 49, you can look on the map and find out exactly where they're at, which helps a lot. RST, readability, strength, and tone. Readability is a 1 through 5. Again, the 5.9. If they're scratchy or hardly readable, they're a 1. If you can read them, but there's a lot of excess noise in, there's a 2. 3 is getting better, 4 is even better, but still some noise. 5 is crystal clear. Strength, again, is how well is that signal coming through to you. And then tone only works in CW, or continuous wave, which is Morse code. So you'll tell somebody your signal's a 5.8 or a 5.9. And like always, if something or I'm going too fast or whatever, say something to me, please. And we'll go back over it. You'll find that advice and assistance runs rampant in the ham world. That's one thing that we're always about. You know, if we can help another guy out with his antenna, with he's having a radio problem, anything like that, then you're going to find that that's what somebody else will do. Just jump in there and try to do for them. We're self-regulated. The ARRL, or American Radio Relay League, are the, quote, official observers for the Federal Communications Commission. You know, FCC is the big brother, and they're the ones that can, you know, pull your license, or, you know, shut you down, or all kinds of things. But normally it would never come without the ARRL, first of all, you know, stepping in and seeing, you know, if there is truly a problem. You know, somebody, just like in everything else in this life, somebody can always say, well, I don't like such and such, so I'm going to say that he's doing this or he's doing that. Well, you know, luckily we have, you know, the ARRL will come in and say, no, they're not. You know, they're operating just as they should. So, you know, it kind of ends it right there. Logging contacts, whether it's on paper or computer, especially when you're logging, you know, HF calls or high frequency calls. It's nice to keep that log of who you've talked to on what date, what power you used, a lot of things like that, because it kind of gives you information later on if you're trying to reach a station in that area as to what you had to do in order to be able to reach them. What frequency, what time of day that was best for that frequency, what power you might have had to use for it. And then there are also the ARRL puts out award programs and QSLs. QSL is a recognition of, by one ham to another, that we talked on such and such a date at such and such a time, and this is your recognition of that. It used to be, and it's less nowadays, but it used to be years and years ago, that the trading of QSL cards was a really big deal. Guys all over the world would like to trade, you know, with somebody else once they made contact, and hams went out of their way to really come up with, you know, humorous or informative, or, you know, just something on a postcard that was extremely informational and fun for somebody else to look at and to put up on their wall in their ham shack. So QSL cards came about, and, you know, and then the award programs are given out, like worked all states, worked all countries, you know, worked all continents, you know, different things like that have got, you know, the a contact for it. In making sure I get to the right place here. The band plan is a plan for formal organizing and operation of a plan. In other words, you'll say that on 80 meters, it's going to be running from 3.0 to 4.0 megahertz. So anywhere on there is going to be, you know, the band of 80 meters. Same thing goes for 40 meters, 20 meters, 15, 17, 10, on up. An informal agreement, just as it says, not a regulation, means that people will say that they operate their net on a certain band. You know, there's no regulation says that they have to, but they, you know, sometimes operate as part of a group. There's a thing called 1010 International that only works on the 10 meter band. So that, they don't own the 10-meter band or anything else, but everybody knows that 1010 International only works on 10 meters. Be flexible about, heavy use and about things like that. You're going to see once you get started, especially once you get in the HF world, that weekends when they're having a contest, unless you're going to try to be a contest person, give up trying to just call somebody and have a conversation, because all you're going to have is CQ, contest. Now that's great. That's what these guys do. They try to see how many contacts they can make in a shorter period of time, which is usually a weekend, and they go for awards by doing it. Usually it's a certificate that they can hang on their wall. Some people really, really get into that. Some people don't. It's up to you individually as to what you like to do. And I would urge everybody, try it. Try all the different things that are available to you. Find out what's fun. And as always, have a plan B. Making contacts, repeater operation. Here, repeater operation is very simple. We'll set up your radio or help you set up your radio. And on this repeater, it's a very, very easy thing. You'll hear, it all the time, giving out the call sign W5NOR repeater, Norman, Oklahoma. And then you listen to how some of the regular people work, how they make contact with one another, the things that they're saying. And if you want to get into the conversation, then wait till between one guy lets off his microphone button and the next guy, pushes his, and throw your call sign out. That's an indication to them that you'd like to join the conversation. Now, I will tell you, and I'm guilty of it just as everybody else is that sometimes in the conversation, you get quick on the button. As soon as they let off of theirs, you're pushing yours. And that doesn't give a chance to other people, to get in easily. So I can tell you that for myself, I'm even making sure that I give that extra time between when they let off their microphone button and when I push mine, in case somebody else wants to join into the conversation. When you have someone call you, you respond to that call by your own call sign. Remember, you always put your call sign second. If you're calling them, like if I was calling Mark, it'd be N5HZR, W5HLG. So he would know that I'm calling him. And vice versa, if he was calling me, he would call me W5HLG, N5HZR. So last, about often used by a club or group. Well, yes, our repeater is by this club. The club bought it, the club installed it, the club maintains it, makes sure that the insurance is paid on it and everything else. So, but do they have exclusive use for it? No. We put out the frequencies, and for anybody that wants to utilize them, they can put them in their radio and they can use it free of charge. There's no cost on it. We don't require anybody to pay to use our repeater, and no other repeater that I know of does either. The only time something like that can come about is when it's on commercial radios. And so as a ham, you're not ever going to have to worry about commercial radios. Repeater signal reports, well, that's, as I can say, an oxymoron. It doesn't make any difference, when you're talking to somebody on a repeater, you can't give them a signal report because it's the repeater's signal you're getting. It's always constant. The only thing that you can tell them is if they have good audio. if they're, clearly making it into the repeater. But other than that, you cannot give a signal report, saying when, because the repeater is always going to be out clear to you. So you look at things like full quieting. That means that their signal is strong enough that there's no noise at all heard in the background. Scratchy, flutter, like multipath. Sometimes you hear a station that's a mobile station. It's a little bit out on the edge. And especially you'll hear a thing called hilltopping. When they get up and down from the hills and the valleys, they may drop out and may come back in. Other times, if they're on the interstate and they're really, really booking it, you'll hear a thing that's called picket fencing, which is their, that type of thing for their voice. So it's not always clear, and you just tell them that, I'm having this problem hearing you, so that they know what's going on as well. Whether it's HF, CW, or single sideband, CQ means I'm calling anyone. CQ, CQ, CQ. W5HLG calling CQ. That means anybody that hears me is welcome to respond back to my station.
Thank you.
And to answer, you give the station's call followed by your own call once or twice. And the use of phonetics there, again, is very common. Whiskey 5, Hotel Lima Golf. That makes sure that they can know that what my call sign was. If I give it phonetically, they can be sure of my call sign. And you'll find out as you get into it even more that you'll use that a lot more than you think. Take turns, easy. Nets can be fun. They can be very informative. They can be used for training, which is what we do here an awful lot. ARRL, which is Amateur Radio Emergency Services, is part of what we do, as a gift, to the area. Tornadoes, we form a net during tornado season. Guys may be either in their home or out in mobiles, and they report on what they're seeing. A lot of times we'll also feed that information back to the National Weather Service or to the Emergency Operations Center here in Norman, which will give them information about sometimes whether they need to go ahead and blow the sirens or not. That's a whole big thing in itself, just making that decision just to let those sirens go. Round tables means that each person, maybe 5 or 6 people, is in a group. And so each kind of takes a turn, talking and just, going from one to the other, just, a nice get together, so to speak. Sharing contacts is the same way. You let somebody know about somebody you talk to, introduce them, and let it go like that. Breaking in, you wait for a pause, give your call. Same thing, whether it's on repeater or HF, it works exactly the same way. Sometimes you can also, use the term comment, which means that they've got a conversation going on that you have some information that they may like to have because they may not know what you know. And so you can always, use the word comment, and they'll let you come in and you can, share with them and maybe answer a question that they have. Making contacts again, Simplex. Simplex FM. When we're talking about Simplex, we're meaning that both stations are on transmitting and receiving on exactly the same frequency. Remember, when you're on a repeater, you're on actually 2 different frequencies, one that you're transmitting on and a separate one that you're receiving on. But in Simplex, you're transmitting and receiving on exactly the same frequency. A lot of times that happens with walkie-talkie to walkie-talkie. It works for stations that are close to one another. Even in ham, with mobile to mobile, let's say you have a 50-watt mobile radio, and the other person has a 50-watt mobile radio. if you're Simplex and you have good antennas on both vehicles, you may be able to talk anywhere from 20 up to 50 miles, just depending on the location. But the 50 miles is going to be a stretch, believe me. But the same thing, if all of a sudden take that frequency and you use it with a repeater, then that distance can easily stretch out to sometimes 100 miles, because all you have to do is get to that repeater. And that repeater is at a high point or way up on a tower. And so it broadcasts out over a wide range. So you can hear the other person's station on the repeater. If you can, try Simplex. There is a national call frequency. If you're driving from state to state or just out on the road, 146.52 is the national frequency for 2 meters. For 70 sonometers, it's 446 even, 446.00 megahertz. Either one of those is a Simplex frequency. And like I said, if you're just out on the road and you're in Colorado and you want to just throw out your call sign, go to 146.52. Throw it out there and see, you may get a trucker, you may get gosh knows who where, may get a ski lift somewhere. You just never know what you're going to come up with when you throw it out to make a contact. On a repeater review, it's a specialized transmitter and receiver, and it has a controller in it. What does that controller do? Well, the controller makes sure that every 10 minutes, that station identifies itself. It also is there so that the technical people that have to work with that radio repeater, if they need to change something on it, make an adjustment on it, it can be done either via telephone line or even over the air with tones. So let's say they need to change the power that its output is. They can do that, just by a controller. It's generally located at a high place. Our repeater is out at 72nd and Alameda, 300-foot tower. So we, not only geographically do we have a high point, but then we added 300 more feet to it. So we've got a good broadcast coverage range. I have actually been able to hit the repeater from Edmond, from my mobile in Edmond. So you'd be surprised how far away you can actually hit it from. Now, I will say, just like we were talking about earlier, you can have sketchy communications when you're out that far. One of the interesting things about this, radio world, and about, that frequency in particular, is that you can move a bandwidth, 19 inches to be exact. You can move 19 inches and it will change from hardly being able to hear you to loud and clear. That's just the way it works. That's just the way frequencies are. So, if you're having problems, move just a little bit and see if it changes. Little hints. The repeater receives and simultaneously retransmits. In other words, at the same time you're saying something on, let's say, 146.06, it's transmitting it back out at 147.660. So there's no pause, no change in it. It's just electronically being changed to a different frequency and retransmitted immediately. And then, like I said, it dramatically extends the line of sight range. Remember, 2 meters is just that. It's line of sight, but the higher you get, the better off you are. Little, visual here. The antenna is a shared antenna. transmitted out and received in on the same antenna. You have what's called a duplexer. And that duplexer allows you to use one antenna. If you don't have a duplexer, then you have to have a separate antenna for your transmitter and a separate antenna for your receiver. And then there's some other problems that you also can get into that are technical, and we're not going to go into those in this class. But the main thing is this is what a repeater looks like, as a transmitter, a receiver, and a duplexer and one antenna. Again, duplex communication is transmitting from one frequency, simultaneously listening on the different frequencies. Output, the frequency of the repeater output may be completely different from the one you have. And the input frequency of the repeater listens to what you're transmitting on. There are repeaters that are located all over the state of Oklahoma and all over the nation. And all of them operate on different frequencies. Now, we have there is a repeater up in Pryor, Oklahoma, that operates on our frequency, but they have what's called a different PL or private line tone. So it makes it so, sometimes we have a little problem, but most of the time we don't hear them and they don't hear us. So it just makes it, easy that you can have more than, one group of people operating on the same frequency, but you're not bothering one another. Things to know about the user repeater, your output frequency. You always have to know these things to program your radio or to get your radio programmed. And there are books out there, or you can go to the interweb and just put in there, search for repeater, National Repeater Book. And by looking for the National Repeater Book, it'll say you can go by state, and then from there, city, and it'll tell you what repeaters are available, what frequencies they are, what PL tones they may use, and everything that you need in order to program your radio to be able to talk to somebody else. The offset, there is a very common thing on 2 meters that the offset is either going to be plus or minus 600 hertz. So like if we're 146.060, then plus 600 be 146.660. So that's how it changes there. Output frequency, here it can be several different things. They'll say, I'll meet you on the 44350 machine. I'll meet you on the Aeronautical Center repeater. It's all kinds of different ways that it can be put. 94 is just that. They're using the last 2 digits of the frequency. All those things will be picked up as you go along. It's not, believe me, there's no test on this part right here. Especially, it's just kind of giving you some operating, hints. An ARRL repeater. Well, amateur radio leg repeater, just about every repeater out there in one way or another is on the national list. So, here ours is called the SCARS repeater, or the South Canadian Amateur Radio Society. And that's what it's known as to most people. We've got another one here in town that we commonly call the OU repeater. And it's on the OU campus. It is usually managed or run by students that are in the OU Radio Club. Now, we were talking about offset frequencies with shifts or splits that standardize and help facilitate repeater use. Up here, we can see on 10 meters, you're usually offset by 100 kilohertz. 6 meters, anywhere from 500 kilohertz, 1 megahertz, 1.7. 2 meters, it's usually 1.25 or minus 1.6. And like I said, you got plus or minus 600. And then on 70, which is the 440 frequency, you got plus or minus 5 megahertz. Now, what is this meaning to you right now? The main thing to understand about all of this is there's standardization. When frequencies are set up, if all of a sudden, let's say they give you a frequency for a repeater on 2 meters, and they tell you that here's your transmit frequency that you need, and then here's your receive frequency. And if that receive frequency is not either plus or minus 600 kilohertz from that transmit frequency, then something's wrong. They gave you a wrong frequency, because there is a standard, and it has to be either plus or minus 600. So always look at that. Again, these aren't test questions right here, but it's, it's information that you'll need just to operate on a regular basis. Repeater access codes. Most of the time, you will never, ever hear a repeater access code. They're called subtones or subaudible tones. Your radio, when you transmit, is actually putting out a frequency on 141.3 in order to open up our repeater. It's like having a key to unlock a door. Having that PL tone or that private line tone programmed into your radio says, okay, this is going to give you access to that repeater. If you don't have it, the repeater won't come up. It won't recognize you, and you'll transmit all day long and never get into it. So those are the certain things, the repeater access tones, that in the repeater book that I was talking about earlier, it will give you that information. For us, 146.06, the access tone is 141.3. And then the other frequency is 146.600, or 660, excuse me, 146.660, again, plus 600. So when you're looking at those, that can give you that information. That subaudible shift or that subaudible tone is just the key that opens up that repeater. And you'll find out that, over 100 different repeaters in this state, and just about every last one of them has a different tone that it uses to open up that repeater. Now, do they all have to be different? No, they do not. Because you're on a different frequency already, you could be using the same tone that somebody else uses on a different frequency. They don't see one another, so it's going to be just as it's going to be clear. They can be called CTSS. They can be called PL, private line, DCS, digital coded squelch. It depends on the manufacturer of your radio as to what they call their particular, quote, private line thing. I'm so used to Motorola, and was, brought up and weaned on Motorola. Motorola saved my life once, that I always use PL tone because PL is what Motorola uses. And, and it helps keep it clear in your head. It's a private line. That's all that tone makes it, is a private line. Again, they're published normally along with all the other information. Repeater is identified, as we said earlier, by Morse code or synthesized voice. And it has the same ID requirements you have. It has to identify every 10 minutes. It has timeout protection. Okay, let's talk about timeout. You get in your car and you're in a hurry and you left your microphone sitting in your seat. And so you sat down on it with your heavy coat. And if you're not the princess and the pea, you don't even know you're sitting on your microphone. And so all of a sudden you've keyed up your radio and you're going down the road and maybe somebody's listening to your AM FM radio in your car and, you know, honky tonk tunes or whatever else, or conversation you may be having, and you don't know that it's going out over the air. Well, our radios are built with what's called a TOT, time out timer. That TOT, not only for the repeater, but normally for our own particular radios, is always normally set at 3 minutes. So in other words, after 3 minutes of listening to you, your radio is going to turn off and quit transmitting, which somebody by that time is probably going to come right back at it and say, you're sitting on your microphone, or something similar. Maybe something about the conversation you've been having. So you may want to make sure where your microphone is at every time you get in and out of your vehicle. But it protects against continuous transmission, a stuck push to talk, or somebody that just likes to hear themselves talk. Believe me, when I'm doing this class, I'm ready by the end of this class not to talk for a while. A courtesy beep, time, tone signals, timeout timers. And it used to be, you don't see it since so many people, everybody has a cell phone, but we used to have what's called auto patch systems. In other words, you wanted to be out and you wanted to call somebody and say, hey, I'll be there in 20 minutes. You could push a couple of buttons on your microphone. You could bring up the auto patch on the repeater and you hear a dial tone, and then you could dial their number and all of a sudden you'd hear it ringing. And when they picked up the phone, you transmit and say, hi, I'm in the car, you're over the radio, and I'll be there in such and such a time, or pass along your information. You'd let off your microphone and they'd say whatever they want to say to you, and then you keep going like that. And then when you're finished, you would again push a couple of buttons on the face of your microphone, and that would turn off the auto patch, and it would hang up the phone line and would go back to normal radio repeater. That's not really used anymore. We still have the capability. I can't remember anybody ever using the auto patch on this repeater in at least 3 years. So, you know, I don't even know that we've got it actually, you know, capable of handling it, but I know that it was. So anyway, that's an auto patch. Common problems. If you're off frequency, it causes audio distortion, low batteries. And just about everybody starts out with an HT, a handy-talkie, a walkie-talkie, however you want to say it. And believe me, the batteries in those, after you've been talking a while, degrade, they go down. So, you know, it's a good idea to keep them charged. It's even a better idea to have a spare battery. You know, and that way, if yours goes out, then you've got another one you can, you know, come in with. Poor location, especially on a handy-talkie. Remember, your output on that's only going to be 5 watts from a little handheld unit. You get on the wrong side of a building, you get on the wrong side of a big tree, you may not be able to get into the repeater. So again, moving a few feet may change it completely. Your access tone could be off or on the wrong access tone, which, you know, that can happen. The repeater can be really strong, but you can't access it because you got the wrong tone. And last is the squelch setting, could be too high. Squelch, okay, what is that? A squelch is what mutes that receiver so you're not listening to static all the time. In other words, when somebody's not talking, you hear nothing, nothing at all. If you don't have the squelch set, then you're going to hear static, continuous static until somebody talks, and then the static goes away. Believe me, you don't want to listen to static very long. So you set the squelch on your walkie-talkie or your handy-talkie, and it keeps it clear so that you only hear when somebody talks. Now, digital repeater systems. This is where it can really get interesting. Digital repeaters, we have a thing that's called DMR, Digital Mobile Radio. And DMR can literally open up a whole new world for you. I've more than once said DMR is the poor man's HF. In other words, if all of a sudden you can have a radio that you can hold in your hand and talk to Korea, talk to Brazil, to Italy, to Australia, and it's just as clear as what you're hearing me right now. That's a wonderful thing, especially from just a walkie-talkie, a handy-talkie. And that's what a digital repeater system can do for you, and DMR can do. Now, that's great unless the interweb goes down. If the internet gateway goes down, or any part of it goes down, then all of a sudden this isn't going to work because you're dependent upon it. Your radio is going into that repeater. That repeater is doing a handshake with the internet through a server and going to wherever you're talking. And the same thing's happening on their end, coming back to you. But like I said, all of a sudden, when you can hold the world in your hand and talk to different countries. I used to have a guy that I talked to on a regular basis about 5 o'clock in the afternoon with a DMR walkie-talkie. And he was taking a walk, his normal morning walk right outside of Seoul, South Korea. He was walking in the woods with his radio, talking to me in Norman, Oklahoma, like we're talking right now. And that's pretty neat.
Mm-hmm.
So, it offers you an awful lot. And there are other types of that doing it as well. IRLP, Echo Link is a whole different type of protocol. There are so many different things out there. I mean, it literally what you're getting into, you have to almost experience so many different things to find out what you may like. Whether it's, simply just using an HF radio to see, if you can make contact with somebody else in the world through the antenna that you put up in your backyard, or whether you're using a digital system, and just using that type of thing. You can, with Echo Link, you can literally put an app on your phone and use Echo Link from your cell phone to talk with another ham operator in, England or wherever you want to.
Wow.
So it's just, the possibilities are crazy. I mean, and you're going to find out about things like satellite usage. We have amateur satellites that are in orbit that clubs have put up that you have access to. There are, again, apps that are out there that will tell you when that satellite is going to be overhead and the amount of time that it will be within range. And you can take a 5-watt walkie-talkie and transmit up into space and then have it come down wherever else in the world that it can come down to. I mean, it's phenomenal in all the different things that you can do. D-Star is a protocol that's used as by one radio manufacturer. Not every radio has D-Star. Digital voice mode, again, there's voice plus a 1200 baud data rate. Digital data mode, 128 kilobytes per second data. Repeaters are linked together worldwide. There again, the DMR setup. So Yaesu and Kenwood are building digital systems. ICOM currently has one. It goes on and on and on. It's every year we're seeing new things come out, new types of radios, new types of protocols. That's the thing that's always the most exciting to me, is seeing some of the things that come out. Anybody need a break? Okay. Nets and emergency communications and special modes. A net is a short for a network. It's evolved over the years. We have social nets, we have traffic nets, we have emergency public service nets. As I said earlier, our club has several different nets every week. Every Monday night at 8:15 p.m., Mark and I take turns on a DMR net. It's on talk group 3140. And it's the Oklahoma Aries digital mobile radio net. But we literally have people check in from all over the country. Got a man and wife check in on a regular basis from Casper, Wyoming, from Savannah, Georgia, from Las Vegas. It's all over. And they just, they like our net. And one of the reasons they like it is because every week we try to throw in some information, something that we can do a little teaching on, or something that helps promote that activity. More locally, Tuesday nights at 8 o'clock, we have the Aries net. Again, that's the amateur radio emergency services. On that, all the people that wish to participate, which is the club members, their call sign is called out by a net control operator. If they wish to check in, then when he calls their call sign out, they respond back. They'll let him know just checking in, or that they have a comment or information, or no comment. And it goes on through the whole net. A social net, usually after that Tuesday night net, we have a thing that's a social get together, shall we say, that's on the lighter side, that people just discuss what they've been up to this week or that day, and kind of throw out things when, if they want to share a recipe, or if they want to share a car problem, or whatever they want to share, they can share it. On Wednesday night on 10 meter HF, we have another net, which is just, again, a get together. But it's local, but it also, depending upon the propagation or the way the atmosphere is, sometimes we'll have people come check in from all over the country on it. So you never know what you're going to get. Traffic nets, Metroplex areas have just that, traffic nets. They will start early in the morning, and the people that are commuting back and forth will let people know, well, hey, I'm 285 at, Danbury Road, we got a pile up. And so they'll share that information so people can do alternate routes. And last is the emergency and public service nets. We do that here, especially. Matter of fact, we were classified as the 2020 Hamvention Club of the Year because of what we do as far as our public service nets. I operate an awful lot of them that let's say a tornado is threatening the area. We'll start managing the, watching the television as far as, what's going on radar. Then I'll open the net. I'll have people check in from their various locations, which I'll log where they're at. We'll compile that against what radar is putting out so that we can get eyes on. See, here's the thing a lot of people don't know. The National Weather Service is really sophisticated. They can tell you, down to a few yards, that something's happening here. The only problem is they can't say it for sure until somebody's eyes are on it. They got all the indication in the world that a tornado is on the ground, but until somebody has tornado on the ground, it's not real. That's what we do. We'll get out there, and we're not chasers or anything like that. That's not what we're trying to do. We want to make sure that our guys stay safe. They can sit in the comfort of their homes, but they can look out their door, look out their window, and see what's happening, what's in that area. Because we have people that are scattered all over. And I do mean that all over.
Oh,
So by having that many people that are, out, and I can gather all that information in one spot, know how that, that tornado is going to travel, and say, I've got such and such, and this many guys in this pathway. I know that I can contact them and ask them what they're seeing, and then pass that along to the Emergency Operations Center. So it's a very, concerted effort that over the years has really been worked out quite well. TrafficNet, again, refers to formal messages as well. There's a national traffic system on HF. It used to be a lot more prevalent in use that somebody wanted to get in touch with somebody else because of, a death in the family or a problem. It's not so much anymore with the cell phones and everything else. But let me back that up just a little bit. That all changes when all that infrastructure is destroyed.
Or too busy.
Or too busy. But Puerto Rico, a year and a half ago, destroyed with a hurricane. I mean, wiped out. The only messages for 3 weeks that were coming out of Puerto Rico were ham radios.
wow.
Because those were the only guys that knew how to rig up something, rig up an antenna from whatever tree survived, and get on the air and, holler back at somebody in the States and say, hey, we need some help. They lost their infrastructure. They lost, all the internet. They lost, everything they had as far as even their own police and fire communications. So, I mean, for weeks, it was literally announcements were being passed back and forth that such and such is safe, such and such deceased. It was amazing to listen to. And we had guys right here in this area, part of the club, that were, helping with that and dispersing that information. So just because we're in Oklahoma, doesn't preclude us from being able to help somebody in Puerto Rico. That's also one of the neat things about this. Let's see. I went the wrong way here. There we go.
Nope.
Public service nets, we do training on those, training for the groups. A lot of times we're trying to, get everybody into working as a unit. It's very important, especially in emergency traffic, that any messages that are passed along exactly. We can't stand conjecture or anything else. So here again, we have a net control station. who acts as a traffic cop, as you can check in. He lets you know you can speak or no, you can't speak. He does all the check-ins and check-outs. He takes priority or emergency traffic first. And then there is, communications discipline. When we say discipline, it's nobody just speaks out. If you need to pass information to another participant, you call the net control. Net control, I have, traffic for such and such. And net control will either grant you permission or tell you to stand by. He knows what's going on in the overall picture. So it may be a good time to pass along that information, or it may not. So again, he's the guy that is controlling the flow of all that information back and forth. Main thing you have to do is follow what he says. Speak only when directed and only to whom directed, and follow through with your comments. Now, here's a typical radiogram that used to be used, and it's still, still can be used. That will, the Red Cross still uses this in disaster information that's coming out. And it is, like I said, it's still in use today when we're going into areas that have been completely decimated. Katrina sure proved that about New Orleans. So, there, a lot of folks have always said, oh, well, this is all ancient stuff because, such and such is taking the place of that. Or, this will take the place of that. And in normal, everyday use, they're absolutely right. But when the defecation has come in contact with the rotary oscillator, then it changes. We support emergency operations. That's why we're here. I mean, that's really what we do. But let's talk about that just a little bit. We've all at one time or another had the exercise where somebody whispers something in your ear, and then you turn and whisper it in the next person's ear, and then they turn and whisper it in the next person's ear. And by the time it gets back to you, God only knows what it is. But it sure isn't usually what it started out as. Well, if you take a group of hams and you put them in that circle, you're going to hear the same thing back in your ear that you said to begin with. Because that's what hams pride themselves on. When they're trying to pass traffic from one person to another, they work on being as specific and as complete as possible. Again, the use of phonetic alphabet to make sure that you have the spelling correctly. The use of, instead of number 9, which could be construed with fine or some other word that comes in like that, instead of 9, they'll say niner. If I say niner, you're not going to construe it with anything else. You know what number I'm talking about. So different things like that, just to make sure that that communication is clear. Now here, amateur radio, civil emergency services, races. In some parts of the country, races is really, really big. And other parts of the country, ARRL is really, really big. In some parts, they have both. Here, we utilize ARRL more, which is amateur radio emergency services. And we support non-governmental agencies, but we also support governmental agencies. I mean, when I'm running a net, I've got in my ham shack, I've got a radio that I can, turn to and talk directly with the EOC on his frequency. So that makes it, he can pass me that information. I can pass him information that I'm getting from guys in the field. And, that tied in with what we've got, on the internet with National Weather Service or what we're getting from radar, gives a really, really complete picture, more so than people would ever imagine. Okay, first thing, don't become part of the problem, please. You're a communicator, you know, not a decision or policymaker. You need to communicate. Uh, the other thing is we don't give out unauthorized information. Sometimes you'll hear information, you know, that's for your ears, period. It's not to pick up the phone and call somebody else and guess what I just heard. Doesn't work that way. One of the quickest ways to find yourself on the outs is something like that. Know your abilities and your limitations. You know, we have folks that, you know, want to go out and jump in their vehicle and go someplace and observe, but that's not what it's about. We don't want to put anybody in harm's way. You know, there are lots of folks that, you know, go out and do storm chasing and everything else because that's how they have their jollies, and good for them, but that's not what we do. We follow radio discipline and net procedures, and we protect personal information. Uh, that's the easiest way I can say it. The Federal Communications Commission can declare a temporary state of communications emergency. And in that, it details the conditions and rules that must be followed. Specifies communicated through websites, the ARRL, the bulletins, the National Transportation System, and over the air. And also avoid operating on restricted frequencies unless you're engaged in relief consent. There are certain frequencies that are allocated to the National Red Cross, frequencies that are allocated to Salvation Army. And so, you know, those people have their own formed nets, their own formed of trained observers and people that work with them all the time. And, you know, if you want to get involved in the band, they're always looking for folks. If you want to get involved with the Salvation Army, then, you know, all you have to do is contact them and they'll put you on the road, what you need to do, you know, some classes that you made to take online or something like that to get you certified. It's just like there's a thing called Mars. It's been around forever. And it's military assistance, you know, from ham operators for military all around the world. For years in combat zones and everywhere else. A person may need to, through a hardship or something else, need to get, you know, information back and forth to a loved one, or be able to talk to a loved one that they can't get a hold of otherwise. And Mars helps to do that. And there again, those people are vetted. They go through security background checks, and only certain people are even allowed to be able to program their radios to those frequencies. So that's another thing, you know, to think about, you know, in the future. Making and answering a distress call. Rule number 1, speak in plain language. Remember, we do not use 10 codes ever. There is no 10-4 good buddy. Please. Mayday by voice, SOS by Morse code. You identify. You identifying your call sign, your location. I try to challenge everybody, especially when I'm first training them for emergency services, to learn how to get their latitude and longitude for where they live. You know, there are lots of apps on your cell phones that you can get, that you can put, you know, program it at any time that you bring up that app. And I don't care if you're out in your car, if you're sitting in your living room or wherever, it will give you your exact latitude and longitude. And that's good within usually 10 yards is how close, you know, you'll get off of that. If you ever have access to the military yeah, global positioning. Usually it gets within 5 centimeters. That said, I always ask my people when they're checking in for emergency services, or if we've got something bad happening, give me your lat and longitude. Everybody here remembers, April 3rd or May 3rd tornadoes, and how more, with this devastation of a category 5, you never knew what the street name was or anything else. I mean, a category 5 takes up the blades of grass. So all you had was a huge, huge debris field. There's no houses to get, house numbers off of. There's no street signs because they're gone too. So in other words, if you're out trying to find somebody, what's the easiest way to do it? If you have their latitude and longitude and you've got a handheld GPS, you can walk exactly to where they're at. And within 10 yards, you're going to find them. So think about that. Write it down for yourself. Keep it handy. If you don't have it on your cell phone, I urge you, put that on your cell phone. Okay, so you give your location, you state your situation. I'm broken down. I'm in the middle of an avalanche. I've had a hurricane, tornado, whatever it may be. You state the problem that you're having, and you say the type of assistance that you need. I need a tow truck. I need police, fire, and ambulance. Whatever it is, make it clear. Wait on the other person that you're talking to repeat back to you, because they will. They'll repeat exactly back to you what you said your needs are. And then they will act on them. And then as soon as they have that confirmation, they'll be contacting you back and saying police, fire, and ambulance are on their way to your location, ETA 3 minutes, or whatever it may be. And then you provide any other important information. I've got 5 victims here. I've got such and such. I've got an active fire. Whatever it may be, you make sure that you keep that flow of information going. Remember, you are the eyes and ears and the only voice out there that can give clear, concise information to those that need it to give you assistance. Tactical communications, well, that changes quite a bit. Tactical identifiers, can change from call signs to a tactical sign. We don't use tactical identifiers very much. Yes, they can be used, but normally they're used in an already state of emergency. Let's say that after the tornado, we had 30 people out in the field. Then they may give them by, tac signals or tactical call signs. Does that preclude you from announcing your call sign? No, it does not. If you're transmitting or receiving or transmitting, then you have to announce your call sign. If you're not transmitting, then if you're just staying in a location, assisting traffic or anything else, you don't have to say your call sign every 10 minutes. It's only when you are actively transmitting. And then again, when you're changing operators, things like that. I've talked many, many times. I've given Go classes or classes on them. I've got a thing on YouTube about it. Go kits can be portable amateur radio operated equipment, emergency power supplies, and go bags that have personal survival supplies and equipment. When I was stationed at Tinker, or not stationed, but when I worked at Tinker, even though I was a civilian employee, my job was one that I had to have a go bag packed at all times because if something happened that was in our area of responsibility, I could be put on an aircraft and sent to the other side of the world. And I mean, literally within an hour's notice. So we would have people that would come by the office and say, you know, I'm here to inspect your go bag. And you tear it apart and let them see everything you had in it. And they do their checklist. And thank you very much. I'll see you again. Never knew when it was going to happen, you know, or how thorough it was going to be. But the one thing I could bank on is it was going to happen. So I ask people, you know, think about doing one for yourself, for every member of your family. You don't know if something's going to happen. We're in Tornado Alley. We never know. You know, we've been lucky here in Norman, unlike Moore. But we never know if something's going to happen, if all of a sudden is going to uproot us. Or you're on the road and something happens. And we all have thought more than once about if something in this country goes sideways, what we're going to do. So there again, if you've got a go kit, a go bag, then that's a great thing.
Is there some reason you're picking on Moore tonight?
Yes, because you guys have more trouble than you're worth.
History.
A lot of history.
By the way, this is Galen. Galen
Hi,
Kidd
Galen.
is the emergency manager for the city of Moore. And he can tell you exactly what I'm talking about.
Monica.
Well, good evening, everybody, and we'll be seeing you next week too, fortunately.
Hi, Galen.
Galen, I don't know if you heard about, I was letting them know about latitude and longitude because of certain.
I was listening.
Pardon?
I was listening.
Yeah. It's a little difficult when there's no signs. So anyway, when you're, if you're going to participate, that's a great thing. We want you to participate. Get training. Take the time. There are all types of things available to you. There is a CERT program that is put on by the EOCs. It's part of FEMA that actually gives you more and more training in emergency services to be of help to your community. You know, I urge you to think about that. So whatever area or how much you may or may not want to participate, at least take the time to get trained to the extent you want to. Nobody is going to force you. That's the one thing you're going to learn. Nobody is ever going to force you to get trained in any of this. But I think most people that ever get into it already have that decision made when they first get into thinking about being a ham. Let's see. Take emergency communications courses, the ARRL courses, the FEMA courses or MEMS. And so look at that. We have a thing that in order to do some of our emergency stuff, you have to have at least the FEMA 100 and 200 course. So I urge you to think about those things. Okay. We talked earlier about awards and DXing. DX is distance. You know, anytime that you're really looking at getting out there, a lot of times when we're calling CQ to ask for another station to respond back to us, they'll add in CQDX, CQDX. CQDX means that you're trying to actually get another person outside of this country to respond back to you. You're seeking, you know, somebody in Brazil or Italy or Spain or England or New Zealand or wherever else to come back to you. There's a thing called propagation that you're going to hear as long as you're a ham. And propagation strictly deals with atmospheric conditions for radio waves how they, interact with the ionosphere and the atmosphere, how the bounces are working. Also, things like sunspots and solar flares and how they interact with our communications. We go into actually solar cycles that people pay regular attention to let them know that during this solar cycle, I have a better chance of being able to talk to Australia, to being able to talk to New Zealand, be able to talk to, Brazil or wherever else it may be. So they pay special attention to those and to what bands are good, whether it's daytime or nighttime. So you'll find out more about that, and they'll help improve your operating skills. And most of all, yeah, it is personally, I can say that one of the most fun things for me is being able to talk to a person in another country and get firsthand from them, like with all the COVID stuff, find out from them exactly what's happening. I talked with a guy in Italy, in October. Italy was one of the hardest hit countries. We all know that. We all know what they were facing and everything else. And so I talked to him, and he said, well, yeah, we're doing fine. And I said, are you wearing masks and anything? Oh, no, nobody's wearing a mask. And it was a very enlightening conversation. And I said, well, I thought you guys were, the hardest hit. And he said, well, we were, but we're over it now.
Mhm.
So we don't hear that otherwise. If you get information firsthand from somebody, what does that mean to you than having a talking head give it to you? So think about how, the fun that you can see with that, about operating with someplace and getting that information. It's interesting hearing this time of year that it's summer in Australia. We're thinking all the cold weather and they're in the heat wave.
Mhm.
So it's a completely different thing. Now we're talking about awards. Okay, they got worked all continents, WAC, worked all states. VUCC, contacting 100 grid squares, and that's the squares that we talked about on the maps earlier. And that's on VHF or UHF. It's not as easy as it seems. It really isn't. We've got some guys that have done it, and it took them years and years and years. So it depends on what you set for your own personal goals. It's nobody's goal but yourself. And that's the neat thing about it. It's like shooting par in golf. Who cares? If you do or not. Well, you do. That's who cares. DXing, contacting stations away. It's been around since the first day of radios. Usually it's HF or high frequency. On VHF and UHF, usually it's outside your normal coverage area. We have a guy here in our club that has worked several states on VHF. That's something that he really enjoys doing. Well, again, on Simplex mode, and it works with his equipment, his antenna height, the type of antenna he runs. He's really gone into trying to perfect it as much as he can to reach as many places as he can. And so he's done quite well with it. Again, it looks as to what you have an interest in. Let's see. More contest. They have state, QSO parties where you'll have a lot of people. You'll have an Oklahoma QSO party, and everybody on the nation is trying to contact somebody in Oklahoma. Then there's state parks on the air. There's a Route 66 QSO park that they have stations all along Route 66. It's amazing the different things you can come up with. Field days. We do 2 field days a year, a winter and a summer field day. And we set up emergency communications and training during that, working off of generators, working off of solar, being out in a tent, being able to set up with just Morse code with guys that are working CW or key operations.
Excellent.
I mean, there are so many different aspects of field days. And the reason that we do this is so the general public can come by. We advertise it in the paper, and so people can come by and actually see what it's all about. It's amazing how many people actually get, the bug, so to speak, after they've been visited a field day and saw the possibilities of things. So, that's one way of doing it. We set up portable stations all over. This last field day, I set up a VHF station with using a extendable fiberglass fishing rod that extended out to 20 feet and an antenna that I made hooked up to it, and a radio that I had in a waterproof box that was solar powered with a battery. And I was making contacts with that. So, that's the type of things that you can do. Why do you do that? Well, let's say that something really bad happened. That may be the only way you can operate with solar power and a battery. So why not perfect it? Why not, put it into use, see what you can do with it, see its limitations, and see where it excels. And maybe where you need to make some changes to make it better. So, get started with your local group. I urge everybody that's looking at, doing this, please come to a meeting once we start having meetings, or come to one of our Zoom meetings and think about joining our club. The South Canadian Amateur Radio Society has nothing to do with Canada, of course, the Canadian River. But, SCARS is a well-known club. It's the biggest club in the state, and easily the best known club in the state. And we have literally clubs from all over the state contact us and say, how do you have so many members? How do you get people, to come in? And the key is we put on training. We put on things of interest every month. We try to always have somebody there that can shed light on some new information or some, give people something to think about. Last month, we had a guy that has credentials out the yin yang on EMP, or, electromagnetic pulse. He's been a tinker. He is a subject matter expert for the government, but he's also a ham. And he shared his knowledge, with other hams about electromagnetic pulses. So you never know what you're going to have in one of our meetings. Other special events can be set up. To some local, event could be doing something. Some stations or demonstrations. We had one once. There is a weather museum. So there was a station set up at the weather museum. Also, different certificates and award for contacting other stations are available that way too. Radio direction finding. Okay. Sometimes it's called using a bug or a fox hunt. But what we have is a little transmitting device that is literally transmitting on an extremely small amount of power. And when I say extremely small, I'm talking maybe 100 milliwatts. Very tiny. And it will be hidden someplace and putting out, just a little irritating noise on a frequency. And then during usually field days, we'll have a section set aside, on direction finding. Go find the bug, go find the problem, it's called a fox hunt. And people will get out with antennas that they have made. We have a kit that actually you can build from the club here. It costs $10 using tape measure parts. And it's a direction finding antenna with a little PVC pipe and tape measure. All of a sudden, you've got a very directional antenna that you can hunt down this source of irritation. But it can be, what else it can be used for? Let's say as a person's in trouble. They don't know where they're at, and their signal is very scarce. So not everybody can hear them, but they need help. So you, again, can use the same direction finding, the same type of equipment to try to get several people out looking at the same time, attacking it from different quadrants. And it helps you to narrow down and, X marks the spot where this person is. So it's good training for search and rescue. Amateur satellites, Oscar. NASA for years has had a program where, as part of their launches, they also will take up and launch amateur radios, satellites that are built by clubs, they are built by universities. Just about anybody that is interested in doing this can, submit them to NASA. There is a very strict set of guidelines they have to use in building them and how they have to be constructed. But at any given launch, they'll take up to, I think 6 or 10 of these little satellites. And usually it's in a first or second stage when it separates and goes out, that it goes ahead and launches those as well. They stay in orbit for a few months, sometimes a few years, and then finally re-enter the Earth's surface and burn up. But it's free to those clubs or to those universities to get those put up in space. And again, that's one of the things that you can get an app on your phone to find those satellites, what frequencies they operate on, when they're going to be overhead, how long they're going to be overhead, and to utilize them with your handheld radio to talk to them and to be able to talk to somebody else on the face of the earth. Very, very interesting. In as far as the modes, you have frequency modulation, analog, which is sideband and CW, digital, again, DMR, and the International Space Station. We have a group in Tecumseh that is coming up, or they've already done it. I'm trying to remember which now, that entered into a thing and was chosen for a school project for the hams to be able to come in, set up at the school, and let the students talk to the International Space Station while it's passing overhead. You'll find that just about every astronaut on the space station is a ham.
Huh.
Yeah, amazing as it seems. All their own call signs, and yes, they're very, very strong about being able to take time out. And sometimes they'll just do it for a diversion. We've had guys that have talked to the International Space Station that, wasn't planned or anything else. They just knew that they were on an overhead pass and they tried it and somebody answered them. So you can have that sort of thing happen. Satellite terms are pretty easy. Uplinks, downlinks, you're transmitting upward or it's transmitting down. A satellite beacon is pretty much just what it's saying. It's a set of tones that may be emitted from that satellite so that it can be tracked as it goes across the hemisphere. Doppler shift is a shift in frequency because of the relationship or the movement between the satellite and the Earth station. And then we've got low Earth orbit, which is what most of the satellites are in, low Earth orbit. Hence the reason they're only up there for a short while, a few years at most, and then they're down. Spin fading, remember that they have to be spinning in order to do what they do. So it's caused by that rotation of the satellite. It has multi-antennas sticking out on them. If you want to actually see one, just, Google it, Bing it, however you want to do it. But look up on the interweb at amateur radio satellites, and it'll show you pictures of what they actually look like. You can have a PACSat, which is a packet radio satellite. Again, that's a digital. That digital information is going up, being retransmitted, and coming back down. Tracking software on your phone, and then the mode, the bands that the satellite is using for uplink and downlink. Normally, it's always going to be on 70 centimeters and 2 meters. Even for the International Space Station, same thing. Slow scan television. Yes, hams do slow scan TV. We did a thing last year when they had the lunar, what am I trying to say now? Lunar blackout.
Eclipse.
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 A lunar eclipse. And some guys were set up with their telescopes, and they were taking digital pictures or digital video of that and then retransmitting it off of a handheld unit. And we were downloading it from other handheld units and using a program on our cell phone to decode the program that they were using. And as it, you would hear a lot of noise and everything like that, but then all of a sudden you were seeing line by line coming up on your cell phone of the image that they were seeing through their telescope. That's cool. I don't care who you are, that's cool. So, it's interesting, some of the things that you can do. It's not like regular TV, hence the name slow scan, but it's very interesting that you're actually transmitting it from just a handheld walkie, to another station like that. Amateur TV can go the same way, almost to be at the same, way, 540 lines a second to regular television. And it can use the NTSC TV format as well. I don't know if international or other countries use the PAL format. I know in this country we use NTSC. Special modes. Okay. You ever watch the guys fly radio control airplanes and helicopters? Well, they have radio transmitters and, that they can use, and they don't have to have a license like a ham does. But if you're a ham, you also have that capability on the 50 megahertz band to do radio control of those aircraft or helicopters or whatever you're controlling. The only difference is you've got a lot more distance than they do, a lot more distance than they do. So you can do things that they could only dream about because of your capability with your equipment. So if you're into that sort of thing, there you go. Let your mind go crazy. And geez, I guess we're there. So I will ask, does anybody have a question?
It sounds like you guys have a lot of fun.
We do. Yeah. I do.
Yeah.
It's interesting. For years and years and years, I dealt with commercial radios. Motorola stuff, things like that. Things as when I was a paramedic, you know, and then before and after that, enjoyed the heck out of it. Even when I was a kid in high school, you know, but I never wanted to be a ham because I did not want to learn Morse code. And so all those years I didn't mess with it because of that. Well, in the 80s, unbeknownst to Lee, they got rid of the requirement for Morse code. So I didn't find out till a few years ago, you know, because I just kind of, that was something I put on the back burner. And I even sat down, I was going to start learning it when somebody told me, hey, you don't have to learn code anymore. You can just go take the test. And so I did, and I got my tech license. And then I studied a little bit more and I got my general. And now I'm studying a lot more because I'm going to go for my extra. Extras as far as you can go. But I will tell you, not only is it the radio aspect of it, but working with electronics, you know, hey, look, I think a lot of us that are doing this are either close to retirement or retired. Of course, there's a lot of people these days that are doing it that aren't, but I'm just saying that there's a large cross section that are in that group. And if you want to have something that keeps your mind engaged, you know, electronics and radios and things like that will definitely keep your mind engaged. You know, and you know, somewhere I think that's what it's all about. It's either that or vegetate.
Not so bad.
Vegetating?
There are times when it's fine.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's times when you sit down with a nice cocktail and watch the sun.
True enough.
Yeah.
True enough.
But yeah. But other than that, no. It's an interesting hobby. It can offer you as much or as little as you want, and that's the thing that I tell folks the most about. You know, you can let your imagination go, and you can probably find a niche that you like.
Lee, I know you probably said it earlier, but how many members does the club have?
Right now, we have 180.
That's a good number.
Yeah, yeah. That's where we're normally at just about every year is 180. Sometimes we dwindle down, but it builds back up during the year. There, sadly, you know, we have deaths just like everybody else in this world. When a person passes, we call them a silent key, which is just another way of saying that they have gone on. But you know, they're the old days. You know, most of the guys used a key telegraph. You know, Morse code, and so when that key no longer was being activated, then they were a silent key.
Oh, that's sweet.
And it's always sad when I've been president this year. Galen is getting ready in January to take over from me as the new president of the club. And it's been an interesting year with COVID.
Oh, yep, that's for sure.
We've had to find ways to overcome some of this where we couldn't meet in person. Just like introducing this class, we had never ever done a video only class. Didn't know if it was going to work, but I had 33 people that bravely signed up and said I'd like to try, which I appreciate them doing that. And from what I've heard from most of the people thus far, it's been working well for them. They've been able to go back, and if they hadn't been able to watch it, right as we're doing it, they've been able to go back and look at the videos and pick them up, and everything's been good. Now, the thing I'll ask, are you guys thinking about taking your test?
Well, I am, but not until January. Christmas and family, and there's too much going on. I can't.
So you can't spend 40 minutes, huh?
No, because I get,
No, it's not the
no,
test
it's-
time, it's the prep time.
no, I won't